Hello, my friend, thank you for being here today. There's a truth few dare to say out loud. Sometimes, the zodiac sign that burns the brightest can also be the most dangerous. Not dangerous because they want to harm anyone, but because their energy can become a flame that both lights the way and burns everything in its path. And in the next few minutes, I want to take you deep into that journey. A place where strength, love, and shadow intertwine into a story both mysterious and profoundly human. And we'll begin right at the root of it all. With their emotions fragile yet fierce, Aries often steps into someone's life with a radiant light, with a presence that makes every room feel like another fire has been lit. People see the strength, the boldness, the directness, but very few pause to notice that beneath that shining armor lies a heart more fragile than you could ever imagine. It's a heart that feels easily, that hurts deeply. And because of that, it carries an emotional power no one can predict. When you live close to an Aries, you realize something simple. Every word you give, every glance you offer, can reach all the way inside them. They're not as unfeeling as people assume. In fact, they sense every small detail in the world around them. A trace of indifference, a pause between your words, a sorrow you thought was hidden. When that sensitivity is held in too long, it can rise like an unexpected wave, crashing into everyone nearby with a force that feels haunting, yet impossible to resist. I believe it's the most fragile hearts that leave the deepest marks on us. You might forget the loud and the reckless, but you never forget the quiet eyes filled with sorrow, or the soft words that strike you straight in the chest. Aries, with all that fragility, doesn't just live for themselves. They make us see ourselves. They make us face the empty spaces we've tried so hard to hide. How many times have you seen an Aries fall silent in the middle of an argument? No fighting, no blaming, just that look in their eyes, holding both reproach and forgiveness mixed with despair. In that moment, you can feel it. You've wounded something sacred, and the weight of that silence will follow you, because Aries' silence is never weakness, it is the language of the soul. In a world that teaches us to be strong, to hide our feelings, Aries exists as a paradox, strong in their weakness, courageous in their fragility. It makes them vulnerable, but it also makes them the ones who can hurt you the most, not because they want to, but because when they love, they give everything. And when that love shatters, all that's left is emptiness. That emptiness doesn't scream, but it lingers like a shadow, leaving those who remain forever restless, because they never know how to fill it again. The message I want to leave with you, my listener, is to learn to cherish fragility. Our society often labels it as weakness, but the truth is, fragility is where strength is born. A seed only grows into a tree when it is fragile enough to crack open, vulnerable enough to let in the sun and the rain. Aries is that seed, and in their fragility they carry the lesson of survival. Have you ever been stunned by an Aries? Not by anger, but by their silence or by a gentle word that shook your soul? If you have, share it in the comments, because sometimes just one honest story can remind someone out there that they are not alone on their journey. When I think of Aries, I don't see a raging fire. I see a candle in a dark room. Its light is tender, gentle, but powerful enough to chase away the night. And yet, with one harsh breath, that flame could be snuffed out. That is what makes Aries so dangerous. They are both the light and the shadow, both fragile and destructive. And in this moment, as you're listening, I invite you to pause and look into your own heart. Do you allow yourself to be fragile, or do you wear armor so no one sees your true pain? Remember this, fragility is not shame. It is proof you are still alive, that you still love, that you are still capable of connection. Aries teaches us a simple but profound truth. To love is to risk being hurt, and to be hurt is to learn how to love deeper. When you meet an Aries, don't just see the strength on the surface. Look at the fire within, where fragility and power live as one. That's where you'll find both the beauty and the danger, both the light and the darkness. And from here, our journey with Aries truly begins. Because their power isn't only in their fragile emotions, but in the quiet way they lead, guiding hearts to follow, even when no one realizes it. There are some people who can walk into a room and without saying a single word, everything changes. The air feels different, sometimes lighter, sometimes heavier, but never the same as before. They don't need to try to impress. They don't need to fight for control. They don't need to force anyone to notice them. They simply show up. and their presence alone is enough to guide emotions, to shift the rhythm of breath, even to alter the direction of those around them. This is one of the most mysterious energies of the very first fire sign in the zodiac. Their magnetism doesn't come from power. It doesn't come from loud speeches. It doesn't come from manipulation. It comes from the truth that inside them lives a raw life force, pure and unfiltered, like cool water or a warm flame. It makes others want to stay close for comfort and afraid to leave, for fear of losing something sacred. Sometimes just one glance is enough to make you feel completely seen. Sometimes just a smile can melt the ice inside your chest. And sometimes even their silence brings you peace or stirs your heart with a heat you can't contain. But here's the strange part, that energy is not always easy. Because when you're too close to someone with this kind of pull, you realize you're stepping into another world. A world where your heartbeat begins to sync with theirs. A world where your decisions start to bend beneath their light. You're not forced, yet you feel willing to follow. That is silent leadership, powerful, without a single command spoken. I once witnessed a friend, fiercely independent, proud, never backing down from anyone. And yet, when she entered a relationship with someone carrying this fire, she began to change. Not because she was controlled, not because she lost her freedom, but because their presence made her believe following was what she truly wanted. That is the mystery of this kind of guidance. You don't feel taken, but one day you realize you've given away a piece of your heart, a piece of your trust, without ever knowing when it happened. This strength, when seen from a human side, is proof that real influence doesn't come from control. It comes from presence. We often think we need big words, loud actions, constant effort to be noticed. But sometimes, simply living true to your own energy is enough to guide others. And fire signs, especially this one, are living proof of that. And here's the lesson I want to leave for all of us, not just for them. Every person carries an energy that radiates outward. It can be peace or it can be heaviness. It can be love or it can be anxiety. You don't need to control anyone, but you can choose what you radiate. So instead of letting your energy become a burden, let it be a lamp for someone walking in the dark. Instead of imposing, let your presence quietly lift the people around you. If you're listening right now, let me ask you, have you ever found yourself following someone not because they forced you, but because their energy was simply too powerful to resist? If you have, share your story. Because when you do, somewhere out there, someone might see themselves in your experience and feel less alone. The truth is, when someone carries this kind of natural magnetism, they can become a fire that lights the way. But what happens when that fire burns too strongly? So strongly that they have to retreat just to protect their own soul. There are moments when their very brightness leaves them exhausted, and the only choice left is silence, a step back, to keep their flame from burning out. And when that happens, the story shifts completely. Silence is no longer weakness. It becomes a way to survive. There are moments in life when we expect an explosion, a fierce argument, an outburst of anger that ends in release. But instead, there is silence, a heavy silence, so deep that you hear your own heartbeat racing. You hear the emptiness between every breath. And when someone known as a warrior, bold and unbreakable, chooses silence, that silence carries the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. It is not weakness. It is a form of protection, a way to keep the soul from shattering one more time. People often mistake retreat for defeat. They think silence means surrender. But sometimes, only the bravest dare to choose silence, because they know arguments no longer heal. Words no longer give life. And the only way to protect their heart is to retreat inward, like a warrior laying down his sword after too many battles. In that retreat, the one left behind feels lost. They wonder, what did I do wrong? Why are there no more words? How could someone who once burned like fire now feel as cold as ashes? That emptiness hurts more than blame ever could, because blame still means they care. But silence is the sign that a door has closed, at least for now and maybe forever. I remember hearing a friend tell me about her love with one of these fiery souls. They used to fight loudly, throw cruel words at each other, but always came back together. Until one day he stopped fighting. No arguments, no replies, only silence, only distance. She told me that was the moment she truly became afraid, because that retreat left nothing to hold on to. No yelling, no anger, only emptiness, and that emptiness hurt more than all their battles combined. Silence is a language we rarely understand, but if we listen closely, we'll hear its deeper message. I no longer have the strength to fight with words. I need to keep something for myself. It is not rejection. It is a silent cry for help. But sadly, not everyone sees it that way. Many mistake silence for denial, and in their confusion, they miss the chance to draw closer, to heal instead of making the wound worse. My view is simple. Sometimes retreat cuts deeper than conflict, because at least in conflict, we still hear each other's voices. But in silence, all we hear is the echo of our own thoughts, and that echo easily turns into a haunting. So instead of fearing silence or resenting it, try to see it differently. See it as a reminder that someone may need understanding more than opposition. When they fall silent, it is when they need you close, not to question them, not to debate, but simply to sit beside them, to let them know they are not alone. And to you listening now, I want to ask, have you ever felt the pain of someone going silent, disappearing without a word? No announcement, no goodbye, just gone, leaving you with endless questions and no answers. If you have, share it in the comments, because the truth is, many others out there have felt it too. And sometimes just reading your words may remind them they're not alone. For those born under this fire sign, the greatest lesson lies in learning how to use silence not to cut off, but to reconnect more deeply. And for those walking beside them, the lesson is never to dismiss silence. Don't wait until there are no words left to realize the value of listening. In today's noisy world, silence has become a luxury, but it is also the most powerful force of all. A warrior who lays down his weapon is not a coward, but someone who knows the time has come to guard his soul. And from that silence, we are sometimes invited to step deeper into their inner world, a place of secrets, of shadows, but also of light waiting to be found. And then, there are moments when silence is no longer just emptiness. It becomes a door opening to another depth, where even a single word spoken at the right time can cut like a blade, touching hidden corners we never expected. Because sometimes when they choose silence, just one sentence is enough to awaken the deepest shadows inside us. Silence sometimes carries more weight than 1,000 words ever could. It doesn't echo loudly. It doesn't shake the room, but it slips in quietly and touches the deepest corners of the soul. People often think of silence as emptiness, but in truth, some silences are sharp like an invisible blade. No one sees it strike, yet the wound it leaves can last for years. When you're around those born with the first fire of the Zodiac, you see this clearly. They don't need to shout. They don't slam fists on tables. They don't use rage to prove their strength. Instead, they might speak just one simple truth, and that truth alone is enough to make your heart ache. It's not the kind of pain that fades overnight. It lingers. It stays with you for days, even years, before you can face it and begin to heal. I once met a woman who told me about her past love with a man carrying this fiery mark. He never yelled. He never used cruel words. But one night in the middle of a heavy conversation, he said just one line, "I don't think you've ever truly believed in yourself." That was it, nothing more. And she told me that single sentence haunted her for years, because it wasn't just the truth he saw. It was also the wound she had been hiding her entire life. This is what makes them dangerous in such a unique way. They don't set out to break you. They simply speak what they see with a rare honesty. And truth, whether beautiful or painful, is always the hardest thing for us to face. It is like a blade. It can cut deep and make us bleed, but it can also carve open a path to healing if we're brave enough to walk it. The way I see it, truth has never been one-sided. It is both light and shadow. It can be the beginning of collapse or the foundation for rebirth. What matters is not whether the truth exists, but how we choose to receive it. A single sentence from someone carrying this fire can feel like a whip, but if you are courageous enough, you may realize it is also a torch, shining into the very places you've tried to avoid. The human lesson I want to share is this. When one of these fiery souls speaks the truth, it is not to destroy you. It is to free themselves, and sometimes to offer you the chance to see yourself more clearly. So don't rush to blame them for their bluntness. Try listening with your heart, because who knows, that truth may be the very gift the universe meant for you. In our world today, we often choose soft words, comforting phrases, truths wrapped in sugar. But it is the raw truths, the ones that hurt, that truly help us grow. And sometimes we need a person like this. Someone willing to say it. Someone willing to face it. Someone willing to let us collide with the shadows we've tried to hide. So let me pause and ask you, have you ever been struck by a single honest sentence you could never forget? A sentence that made you angry, that wounded you, but later changed the way you saw yourself? If you have, share it in the comments, because your story may be the light someone else needs while they're still lost in the dark. When I think of silence as a blade, I don't see it as destruction. I see it as a wave. It can sweep everything away, but it can also wash the shore clean, leaving space for a new beginning. And those with this pioneering fire always leave such marks behind. Indelible, unforgettable. Their danger doesn't lie in shouting. It lies in the simplicity of their words. They don't need to say much, just one line, and that line will echo in your mind forever like a melody with only one note, repeating endlessly. That is a power both fragile and destructive, both wounding and healing. And when you finally sit with that wound, when you've grown used to the silence, you begin to realize something. Behind those words lies another weapon, softer, more hidden. Not blunt honesty this time, but intuition, a quiet fire that sees through the dark where nothing remains unseen. Intuition is a quiet flame. It doesn't roar with fire, but it lights up the places most covered in shadow. Some people need proof. They need confessions, clear evidence, undeniable signs before they'll believe a truth. But there are certain souls who only need a glance, a pause between words, or the smallest shift in energy to know what's really being hidden. Those born with the mark of the first fire are often given this gift, the gift of intuition. And here's the thing, they don't have to search for it. They don't sit for hours analyzing. They don't piece together every fragment of information. Intuition strikes them like a flash of lightning. The heart trembles and it whispers, something isn't right. They see the truth behind the mask. They hear the unspoken words tucked inside a smile. They feel the emptiness inside stories that seem complete. That's why being with someone whose intuition is strong can make it hard to hide anything. You can fool the whole world, but with them, just one fleeting look and you feel exposed as if standing before a mirror. And not everyone is comfortable with that, because their intuition is like an unforgiving mirror, reflecting even the parts of ourselves we don't want to see. I once heard a story from an older man. He told me about the first time he met someone carrying this fiery intuition. In just a short conversation, that person looked at him and said, "You're trying to appear strong, but the truth is, you're terrified of losing everything." Those words froze him, because that fear was his deepest secret, one he had never admitted to anyone. No one knew, yet this person saw it instantly. He said in that moment, he felt both relief because someone understood and exposure, as if all his defenses had been stripped away. This is the double edge of intuition. It is a gift, but it's also a responsibility. Used to bring light, to love, to guide, it becomes a hand lifting lost souls. But used to judge, to control, it becomes a sharp blade that no one can resist. I believe we all have intuition, just at different levels. But for those whose flame of intuition burns brighter, life places a greater responsibility on them. That responsibility isn't to wield a knife. It is to hold a torch to guide those walking through the darkest hallways of life. And the human lesson I want to emphasize here is this. If you've been given intuition, use it to heal, not to control. Let that light lead others out of fear instead of binding them with it. Because real intuition was never born to rule. It was born to set free. So let me pause here and ask you, have you ever felt intuition warn you about someone, about something, and it turned out so true it made you shiver? A moment when your heart knew before your mind ever caught up. If you have, share that story, because your experience might become the mirror that helps someone else trust their own intuition. But when we talk about the intuition of these fiery warriors, we also need to understand it isn't always easy to carry this gift, because when their heart is wounded, that intuition becomes a burden. It no longer shines only for others. It shines back on their own scars. They see betrayal before it happens. They feel distance even before someone leaves. They hear the crack in love long before the truth is revealed. And that is the deepest pain, to see it coming, but be powerless to stop it, to know the truth, yet remain unseen, unheard. In moments like these, intuition is both a light in the dark and a flame that burns their own heart. We often admire those with sharp intuition, but rarely do we see they too need to be held. They need a safe place to set down the weight their light carries, because knowing too much is not always a blessing. Sometimes knowing too soon, seeing too clearly, only makes the wound deeper. And when intuition meets pain, their power is no longer just light. It becomes a weight for themselves and for those who love them. It is here, at this crossing point, that the story reaches a deeper layer, where the flame that was meant to give life becomes the very fire that tests the soul. Fire has always been an image of beauty and contradiction. It can warm us. It can light the path through the darkest night. It can become a symbol of hope. But that same fire, if you stand too close, can suffocate you with its heat. It can burn you until you're exhausted. For those who carry the strength of this pioneering flame, this is their greatest paradox. They are both a source of light and a challenge for anyone who steps into their orbit. When you love someone like this, your heart is constantly pulled in opposite directions. On one hand, you feel inspired, ignited, pushed to become the strongest version of yourself. Every word they speak, every move they make awakens something in you that's been sleeping for years. But on the other hand, you also feel drained, because that light is too bright, too intense. You want to keep up, you want to run with them. But the more you chase, the more you realize your own legs can't match their burning pace. A friend once told me that loving someone like this felt like living in two worlds at once. Some days she felt blessed, as if she had touched the sun. She felt love blazing, passion endless, courage few could ever give. But only a few days later, her heart felt exhausted, as if she was carrying the weight of that fire on her shoulders. She said that kind of love was unlike anything she had ever known. It gave life, and at the same time, it stole her breath. From my perspective, I believe this. The things that shine the brightest are often the very things that frighten us most. We admire the sun, but no one can stare at it for too long. We gather around the fire to feel its warmth, but we all know to keep a safe distance so we don't get burned. And so it is with these fiery souls. When you walk beside them, you feel lifted, but you also learn the importance of protecting yourself. The human lesson here is simple, yet difficult. Real love is not about enduring each other endlessly. It's about balance. Balance between radiance and peace. Balance between admiration and staying true to yourself. Balance between letting their light guide you and finding your own small lamp inside. When two people learn that balance, love stops being a chase. It becomes a dance, graceful, harmonious, where both have a place to stand. So let me pause here and ask you, have you ever loved someone like this? A love that lit you up but left you weary. A love you couldn't let go of but also couldn't hold too tightly. If you have, share your story, because maybe in your words someone else will find recognition. Maybe they'll see themselves. Maybe they'll find a way through their own paradox. What makes this pioneering fire so different is not just the strength they radiate. It's the way they force those around them to face their own limits. And through that journey, both sides learn the same truth. No one can live forever in blinding light, but no one should live forever in darkness either. And then within all of these contradictions lies a deeper mystery, because these fiery souls don't just live in one world. They always seem to walk between two realities. One belongs to the material life full of noise, full of duties. The other belongs to the unseen world full of intuition, of whispers, of messages from the soul. It's this ability to live in both worlds at once that makes them so elusive, so mysterious. There are people who, when you look at them, you see them clearly here, alive, present, moving through every moment of this life. But if you look closer, you notice their eyes seem to drift somewhere far away, as if their soul has just stepped out of another world. They are near, vibrant, alive, yet fragile in a way that makes you feel they never fully belong here. Their soul is like a bridge, one half rooted firmly in reality, working, loving, building, fighting. The other half floating in the unseen, a place of intuition, of dreams, of whispers no one else can hear. It's this dual existence that makes them such a mystery. You can hold their hand, feel their warmth, and still ask yourself, why do I feel they're so far away? A friend once confessed to me that loving someone like this felt like loving a soul with two faces. There were days when they were fully present, laughing, sharing, loving, and life felt whole. But there were other days when they seemed to drift into a world only they could enter. You could call their name and yes, they would hear, but their eyes were already fixed on someplace else. A place where only they and the invisible messages of the soul could go. My view is this: the more deeply a soul is connected to the unseen, the lonelier they often feel among people, because they see things most cannot see. They feel currents that are invisible. They hear the whispers of the universe, and that can make them feel out of place even in a crowd. While others laugh, they wonder about the deeper meaning. While others are content with surfaces, they search for roots. And that difference, that distance, makes them proud loners. Yet that same difference is also their gift, because they become a mirror to the world, reminding us there are things we can't see with our eyes but can feel with our hearts. They remind us that we are not just bodies and jobs. We are also souls and dreams. While many chase the light outside, they call us back to the small flame burning within. The human lesson here is clear. Being different is not a burden. It is a gift to the world. So if you often feel out of sync with those around you, trust that it's the mark of a soul still connected to something greater. The world needs people like this to balance, to remind, to heal. And to you listening now, have you ever loved someone who, even while sitting beside you, felt like they were living in another world? They could sit quietly next to you, but their heart was in conversation with something invisible, beyond your reach. If you've ever felt this, share it, because your story may help others see that loving such a soul is not about loss. It is about learning how to love what is both here and not here. When you walk with a soul like this, you learn to treasure every moment they are truly present. You learn to open your heart wide enough to hold both their closeness and their distance. And you discover that loving someone like this is not about possession. It's about companionship. And then the story grows deeper, because the most dangerous moment does not come when they burn bright. It comes when they suddenly choose to put out the flame, when they retreat quietly without a word. The darkness left behind fills not only the room, but the heart of everyone who ever loved them. And that becomes the doorway to a new, mysterious chapter in this journey. The final withdrawal always carries a haunting weight, one without a name. It doesn't come with tearful goodbyes. It doesn't end in shouting matches. It comes in silence, a silence so cold it chills you to the bone. Those born with the pioneering flame don't need anger to end a relationship. They simply turn their back, walk away quietly, and leave behind an emptiness no one can ever fill. People often say the most painful ending is betrayal, but I believe there's something even deeper when the person who once lived inside every breath of yours is suddenly gone. No farewell, no warning. Just one day, you notice the room is missing their laughter. The conversation lacks their reply, and your heart no longer beats in rhythm with theirs. It's this disappearance that leaves the soul gasping for something to hold on to, searching for answers that never come. This silence feels like darkness slipping in without knocking. It doesn't shatter you all at once. It seeps in quietly into every corner of your heart, into every hidden place in memory. And then the questions begin. What did I do wrong? What did I miss? Or was it simply that their fire had burned out? Those questions echo again and again until they become a lingering sound long after you've moved on to another chapter of life. My view is this: nothing haunts like a disappearance without words. Because if words still exist, there's still a chance to face them, to argue, to apologize, to forgive. But when silence falls, all that's left is emptiness. And the only voice you hear is the one you invent inside your own head. It is that lack of clarity that cuts the deepest. The human lesson here is simple but urgent. Don't wait until someone has nothing left to say before you finally learn how to listen. Don't assume silence means peace. Sometimes, silence is a cry for help we never recognized. If you love someone, listen even in their quiet moments, because that silence could be your last chance to keep them close. So let me pause and ask you, have you ever experienced this kind of silent leaving? A withdrawal with no words that left a corner of your heart empty, even years later? If you have, write in the comments, I understand this feeling, so others will know they are not alone. Because sometimes just knowing someone else has lived through it too is enough to ease the loneliness. And then we realize the final silence of those with the pioneering fire is not absolute. It is not an ending carved in stone. It is a chapter closing to make space for another to begin. For them, it is the search to reclaim their inner flame. For us, it is the lesson of living with the emptiness, learning to grow deeper, stronger, more grateful. Thank you for staying until the very end of this video. My wish for you, the one listening now, is this. May you always have the courage to protect your heart, the love to share your flame, and the peace to continue forward on your soul's journey.